Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. Over the past several weeks, I've had the chance to travel quite a bit, and I've seen a lot of farmers getting a jump on their spring field work. Chad Colby has seen something similar. Last week, he was outside Wade Farms at Wapella, Illinois, saw the folks getting after it to get that 2024 crop in the ground. Thinking ahead to the 2024 crop, it's not just planting it, it's marketing it that is always going to be a challenge. Recently, I had the chance to talk with Lauren Bray. She's the managing director of Farmers for Sustainable Food, and she spoke with me about how this organization is working to make sure farmers are getting credit for the sustainability work happening on their operations.
Farmers for Sustainable Food was established in 2016 by Edge Dairy Farmer Cooperative and the Dairy Business Association in collaboration with the Nature Conservancy to support our dairy farmer members. We do that through managing and developing sustainability projects, but also through supporting farmer-led conservation groups. And what's unique about that is it's not just dairy farmers that we work with, but we also support other farms in local groups who are working with their dairy farmer neighbors on conservation. And we have a proven model for sustainability projects that's based on a framework with multiple projects that have multiple years of data. And part of that proves that conservation can be financially sustainable as well. And we will be expanding these projects through a recent Climate Smart Grant Award.
Could you give us an indication as to some of the projects that you've worked on and hope to work on going forward?
Well, we have 4 projects that have multiple years of data, not only in Wisconsin, but also South Dakota. And in those projects, we're working directly with farmers to help them understand what their data means for sustainability metrics. So we're helping them gather the data, analyze it, understand how they can use it to better manage their farms. So they're getting some value from that. And we'll be able to expand that opportunity for farmers now with this Climate Smart funding, where farmers not only do not have to pay for this support, but they will be compensated for sharing their data.
So this is pretty fascinating, and to see this rolling out so quickly in an area that's changing so fast is going to be helpful for a lot of growers. What are you looking for now for farmers? Is it time to up the participation?
Yes, we are looking to actively enroll farmers who are in our upper Midwest region and qualify for our project. People can learn more at farmersforsustainablefood.com under the Climate Smart Projects page, and we'll have an email there where you can reach out and get more information to see if you are eligible. But really, it's at the end of the day about supporting farmers in managing their data and using it to make decisions on their farm that can help them not only in sustainability but profitability. We'll also be looking to connect farmers who participate with the supply chain. So whether that's your dairy processor you're shipping your milk to, or maybe where you're selling your grain, helping you figure out how you can monetize the work that you're doing on your farm, whether that's in your supply chain or through some sort of carbon market, for example.
As sustainability concerns remain top priorities for buyers, ensuring that agriculture is telling the story of the work we're doing on the farm remains very important. If you want to be a part of that, you can join Farmers for Sustainable Food at farmersforsustainablefood.com. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. Now it's time to dig into the markets. Joining us this week is Don Close, the Chief Research and Analytics Officer with Terrain. We're going to talk about the cattle market. Don, it has been a roller coaster for the past several years here in the cattle business. We're on an upswing right now. Where do you see cattle going in the short term, live cattle?
I don't think it's near over with. Now, I think we have a challenge of the market getting ahead of its skis and the cause the kind of correction that we had in November, early December. But for the overall, we're far from seeing our tightest availability of numbers. This is going to continue for a while, the next couple of years. So I think there's still some incredible opportunities.
Don, let's talk about that correction. We saw at the tail end of 2023, from October through December, that market saw 30% of its value pull out of it. What was it that pulled it down, and why is that market still susceptible to that happening potentially again?
I think it's due to the fact that specifically the commodity markets but it's an instant gratification market. And we see the uptrend in the market, so simply, as I've said before, I think the market is just getting ahead of its skis. We outrun the timeline of the market, forced to have those kind of corrections, ready to go again.
All right, so we're off and running. Prices for live cattle are back up. We're pushing that 180 level, Don. Where do you see us headed here into the summer?
I think we're expecting to see a typical spring market. I'm not so sure we've seen the spring high as of yet. More so than I think we'll see a lot of additional price escalation short term. I think the real strength of this market is we probably won't see the amount of correction for the summer that we would normally expect to see in a typical seasonal.
Okay, so similar to last summer where prices go up and stay elevated for the remainder of the summer.
Just a really flat price outlook through summer and fall.
So if we've got feed yards, Don, that have been looking at, widely variable incomes over the past several years, how aggressive do you want them to be on hedging when we get to these upper levels in the summer?
As optimistic as this market is, I'm not concerned necessarily with price going forward. I think there's a huge challenge with input cost, replacement cattle cost being as high. Managing break-evens is going to be a huge challenge. But the biggest point of this is at these price levels and the volatility that is just associated with record price levels, I think that having risk management in place is imperative to owning the cattle.
Absolutely. And particularly, as you mentioned, these risks are staying here, these costs are staying elevated. Don, for producers who maybe have been shrinking their cow herd in the past several years, is this still a time to get in if you're looking to expand?
I actually think it is. And as scary as that is, and as I've been talking with farm credit audiences through the winter and early spring, certainly that's probably one of the most frequent questions I get. And I think it's still an opportune time to get in, and we know from the 14-15 experience, we know from previous rallies, I still think there's going to be a period of time when the market gets so good that everybody's going to want in the same day, and so to be acquiring some numbers, even at these price levels, I think it's okay.
Worth jumping into. And then, Don, when we come back, we're going to spend a little time on the feeder cattle price outlook and your thoughts here in the hog market as well. So thanks for joining us and stay with us. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. We're back talking about the protein markets with Don Close, Chief Research and Analytics Officer with Terrain. Don, you mentioned that a lot of producers are looking back on that 14-15 time period as an analog to when this cattle market saw record prices and then pulled back. It sounds like you don't feel as though that's quite accurate. What are the differences between 14-15 and today?
So the big difference I see, we came out of the Great Recession in 08. We went into that natural cycle high in the market and had been liquidating from 09, 11, 12. We had reached a point that we thought the market was at equilibrium and we could start to expand. When all the market analysts, kind of gave that green light, there were some heifers being retained and entering the system then. As soon as that was done, we got into that massive drought that lasted 11, 12, 13 that just forced that liquidation to continue, but we did have that set of replacement heifers in the background. This time we don't have that. We've cleaned the shelves on cow inventory. We've cleaned the shelves with heifers because of the numbers of heifers on feed. So this time we're way earlier in the process than what we would have been comparing to 14-15.
All right, so not exactly a great analog year for this rally. Don, feeder cattle prices. If we're going to see live cattle get up towards 200 again, or perhaps over, what are feeder cattle pricing doing?
I think the real challenge, we talked there, managing input costs, but we saw, as in particularly Oklahoma City market this past week, but auctions in general, as we approach that grass fever time of year, the excitement level is going to go really high here. We're seeing it certainly on the feeder weight cattle, but we're also, as demand for calves is coming forward, we're going to see them work higher. The real challenge that I'm seeing is not so much cash feeders as it is feeder cattle futures, because at this juncture we're so counter seasonal because we have rallied, since the first of the year. Typically, we will see that spring low in feeder cattle prices and work higher into August, September. This year, when we're starting at prices that you think could have been the high, but all that seasonal strength, I think they'll get higher. I just don't see the rate of price escalation that we would normally see from here forward.
Okay, at least some stability pushing to the upside, not a Mount Everest type climb.
Slowed down the excitement.
All right. Well, speaking of slowed down excitement, Don, it sounds like cattle have a lot to work on.
Yes.
The hog industry coming out of one of the worst years of profitability in record. Are we going in the right direction on the hog herd size?
I think we're absolutely going in the right direction. And I think we're going in the right direction not only from continued sow liquidation, but just that reduction of gilts going into the system. So we're working at it on both ends. We're seeing some improvement, both cash. We've certainly seen a rally in the summer hog futures to and just over $1. We've recommended to our audience that we're at a level, it may not be much more than break even, but we're really encouraging to have some hedges in place at this time for the summer fall market.
Okay, at least for the summer and fall. You're not looking too far out beyond that at this point, given where prices are.
We'll see that we'll get that hog and pig report out and see just how aggressive this liquidation continues to be. But I'm going to be cautiously optimistic at late second half and as we go into 25.
All right, if we could see some real strength in the beef market, continue to pull that hog strength up, that would be a tailwind for sure.
One thing I would add to that, demand for protein continues to be incredibly good. Beef's leading the pack, but at the price spreads, we're seeing improvement in pork and broilers. So the consumer's staying with us on this.
There we go. Don Close from Terrain, thanks for joining us this week.
You're more than welcome.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
It's time to dig into the weather. Meteorologist Greg Solier joins us now. And Greg, what are you watching in the Pacific Northwest for this next week?
Generally speaking, it's a continuation of this El Nino weather pattern and the reemergence of cold Arctic air despite the March calendar date. Boy, some folks are going to get it and get it big here, but at the same time with that cold air, and I'm sure it's pretty tough on livestock operations, calving, lambing into Montana and points out to the east, it is additional moisture. We'll talk about it from Montana off to the east. Matter of fact, here is storm system number 1 or 2, depending on where you want to start the count, making its way across the northern and central plains. Here we are, mid to late March, and heads up livestock managers from Yellowstone to the Black Hills and points out of the east. This is sub-zero cold at night, single digits by day in this particular corridor, and its western flank into parts of Washington state. Meanwhile, just a couple of showers, northern California, but we'll add to the snowpack, which has been pretty much disappointing as it applies to an El Nino year in the Pacific Northwest and northern Rockies. There are actually 3 storms ahead for the northern half of the country. Will likely double and triple some of the snow totals we've seen for at least astronomical wintertime, of which welcome to springtime, anything but with this kind of feel and setup across the northern and central plains. But again, it's moisture. Snow drought conditions have been dominant this El Nino season. Frigid weather through the Canadian prairie, cooler, dry air into the Pacific Northwest and northern California. Down in the southwestern sections of the country, just an absolutely devastating scenario here. These systems, they energize to areas east of the Panhandle country. We bring in a strong wind downslope off the southern Rockies, and no moisture, and fires continue on here. A little rain and snow into New Mexico, but it's a late season snow event and a storm at that for parts of the western high plains and central Rockies. That weather system blows on through. Here's a second and or third in a series out across the Four Corners. Once again, a rain-snow mix and likely to be snow in the high plains areas. Windy, colder weather down into Texas. Pretty quiet weather pattern across the valleys of California. And where skies clear, winds drop back, Mike, probably a pretty good frost and freeze all the way to the Red River Valley of the south this week.
Well, Greg, we've seen some northern Corn Belt growers moving some dirt here this past week, getting ready for spring. Looks like with those systems, that might slow down. week.
Yeah, especially those western Corn Belt areas. We've been in maybe a little earlier than usual access, and despite the recent rains in the eastern Corn Belt and drought improvement, you get these days last week with a strong west-southwesterly wind, mild temperatures, low afternoon humidity. You actually firm things up, but our reports down here and sources saying the tile line's in pretty good shape here into the central Corn Belt. But look at this complexity of weather, from freezing rain up towards the Sioux, a blizzard out towards the Black Hills, showers and thunderstorms early to midweek. They're back into play for the western Corn Belt, much of the Midwest. But again, drought relief for some of the worst areas into Iowa in particular. That weather system moves up into the Canadian Prairie. Here's this Arctic air laid on out. Spring warmth is down here. The jet stream digs out of the western states and makes its way across the Midwest. So a window of opportunity here, but we're back into increasing rain and snow back west of the Missouri. Not a bad thing, but again, pretty tough one on man and beast for this week. Severe weather, again, roughly in a line, Wichita, Oklahoma City, Dallas, Fort Worth, and points out of the east. Just wind and colder air into West Texas cotton country. The showers and thunderstorms make their way into the central plains. More severe weather mid to late portions of the week. Again, back into wind for areas of West Texas. Cooler, drier air into the Gulf Coast area. And again, where skies clear, winds drop back between these weather systems, frost and freeze out of the southern plains.
What are you expecting to see, Greg, as you cast your eyes to the Atlantic Ocean?
As we see it right now, here's one weather system wound up but moving offshore out of the Gulf Stream areas of southern New England. Here's the next dynamic system with Arctic air to the north. Spring warmth down south will expand the showers and thunderstorms. We'll take it into the western Corn Belt areas. East, we go for a little more rain into parts of the southern complex. This weather system blows its way into the Canadian Prairie. The wraparound effect, we dislodge cold air, Arctic air into the Great Lakes region with a new snow and rain system making its way into the western Corn Belt areas. So again, limited in access, especially into the eastern Corn Belt for this week, and we need the moisture back to the west. Here's the frost potential for the Carolinas. Cooler, drier air into the Gulf Coast areas. Wind and warmth and thunderstorm activity getting going into eastern sections of Texas. That'll go through Bayou country and into the southeastern part of the country with showers and thunderstorms there. No frost or freeze potential across the Tennessee Valley. We'll watch it in the southern plains with temporarily cooler, drier air moving in late portions of the week.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hi-Pro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Across the country, there are thousands of men and women who advocate fiercely for agriculture and the rural way of life. Al Gustin recently had the chance to meet one of them, a woman who was named American National Cattlewomen's Educator of the Year.
Out in the calving pens is an appropriate place to visit with Kathy Tokash. It's calving season and she spends a lot of time here, as does her husband and their son and his family. Kathy's been around cattle all her life. She has a passion for cattle and the beef industry and a passion for educating. For the past 20-plus years, she's been active in and a leader in the Cattle Women's Organization, including North Dakota State President.
And the one thing that really got me super involved was probably about 10, 12 years ago at one of these ag events. When we were talking about ground beef and hamburger, and we said, where does your ground beef come from? And they told me it came from turkeys.
She says she knew it was time to help those kids understand at events like local ag days.
And that's one place where we can go and visit with anywhere from 1,200 to 2,000 plus students. Usually they're kindergarten, preschool, kindergarten through about second, third grade.
She's full-time on the ranch now.
You know, I was a nurse in my prior career, so I do like to educate.
Ashley Hughes, the executive director of the American National Cattlewomen, said this of Kathy: she is the definition of a dedicated educator who has spent countless hours educating about beef and the cattle industry.
So you need 12 chicken breasts to equal the same nutrient value, or close to the nutrient value of 3 to 4 ounces of beef.
And these days, educating about the role of cattle in the ecosystem.
I mean, they all need to understand why we need to have the cattle out there grazing, because what percent of the ground out there you can't farm, so we need to utilize that grass.
She says she's humbled by the National Educator of the Year award, which she says needs to be shared with her Cattlewomen teammates. And she's not through educating.
Yeah, sometimes, maybe I could stay home and clean the house. But, there's this beef activity that's going on that's important.
For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Al Gustin.
Thanks, Al, for that update, and congratulations to all the great outreach that American National Cattlewomen does. Great outreach is an important part of the agricultural story. And last week, a huge event known as South by Southwest was happening in Austin, Texas. This is a gathering of music, technology, and entertainment. Altogether, about 200,000 people got together in Austin for this meeting. And agriculture was there too. The United Soybean Board had a couple of panels. Joining us this week to talk through it is Tony Mellenthin. Tony was the moderator for one of those panels introducing sustainability into the entertainment world. Tony, thanks for talking with us this week.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me on. It's my pleasure to talk with you.
Let me ask you first and foremost, South by Southwest is about as far from agriculture as we can get. Tony, why was the United Soybean Board on hand for this event?
Right. Well, we were there. First and foremost, in everything we do, it's representing the United States soybean farm. So we were there doing that. South by Southwest is a place where influencers in the food and sustainability aspects of all these multinational and national companies, they go, they network, they collaborate. I like to say we collaborated with the innovators who can mainstream our products into their innovations.
That's pretty cool stuff. Tony, can you talk specifically on the panel you were moderating? What were some of those innovations that soy is helping bring to the table?
Right. So my panel was about sustainability in production sets in Hollywood, which is probably not on many farmers' radars. And I understand. But the reason why we're doing that is, one, soy has a lot of building material alternatives, whether that be paints, adhesives, plywood type products. So a lot of building materials that can incorporate soy into them. And Hollywood, they turn over these sets rapidly. So you're talking movie set is maybe up for 1 month, maybe a little longer, depending on the true duration of filming. And then there is a lot of waste with every movie or TV that's produced. Roughly on average, it's 240 tons per production set.
Wow.
And it is a point of emphasis in Hollywood to not just talk about being sustainable, but to actually make it happen in what they do. So we talked about that during my panel, but we also talked about an immediate impact can be using renewable diesel in their generators, because they don't rely on the electric grid, because they, can't, if there's something that goes wrong, they can't stop. So they have diesel generators, all kinds of them on each set.
Absolutely. And so after the panel, what was the response from the attendees? Did it open up some of their eyes to the value of soy?
Absolutely. We had, afterwards, we allowed questions. A handful of people asked questions, but I think the biggest takeaway is we had a small reception outside the room afterwards, and that whole area was filled with people and a lot of interactions, asking more questions about soy, asking about how soy can be incorporated into different products and how we can help different people achieve their goals.
That's what it's all about, introducing folks who might not be aware of our industry to the benefits we can bring. That's Tony Mellenthin, soybean grower from up around Oak Golly, Wisconsin. Tony, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And folks, stay with us. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we come back.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. As farmers around the country are preparing for their 2024 crop, they're wondering which aspects of the budget do they need to keep in. Max Armstrong recently had a chance to talk with Kim Tudor at BASF about how some components might provide more return.
We can never predict exactly what kind of stress our crops are going to be under, right? It could be hot, it could be dry, it could be wet, it could be wind, it could be hail. And so having those conversations now, thinking proactively about those preventative BASF performance-driven fungicide applications to support your crop and provide the consistency year in and year out, regardless of the weather conditions.
We know the difference those mid to late season rains can make, especially when you're looking at the soybean crop, but corn too. And your point is a good one, that the disease pressure can still be there and maybe rear its ugly head right when maybe some yield could be captured if the crop is protected, right?
Absolutely. So, you think about problematic diseases like in soybeans, so frog eye leaf spot, Cercospora blight. Cercospora blight's really problematic. It's seed-borne, so it's got a really long latent period, that time between initial infection and reproduction. Sometimes you don't even see symptomology until 109 days after planting. Conversely, if we're thinking about tar spot in corn, that's one that's top of mind, I know, for a lot of corn growers across the U.S., even folks that haven't experienced it yet. They've heard the horror stories. Again, tar spot has a really long latent period, so that time between initial infection and reproduction, where you don't even realize that pathogen is present inside that plant tissue, that it's depositing toxins, it's robbing that plant of its photosynthetic capability, which ultimately drives yield. And so again, taking that wait and see approach, which a lot of folks often try to do, it can hinder you, right? Because that disease is already reducing that yield potential before you're even aware that there are symptoms or that you can spot a lesion with your naked eye.
Yeah, some of that disease pressure may very well be there, obviously, and you're not thinking about it. So producers need to get those products on the radar screen early. Have Valtima, Revitec make sure that they're ready to go when the time comes when they need to do.
Exactly. And I would just say, being proactive, have that conversation now. And the great thing about our products, that I encourage folks to consider, I know commodity prices are top of mind for a lot of people, but what's the number one way to battle a low commodity price? It's more bushels. Right? Put more bushels in the bin. And so with Valtima and Revitec fungicides, our performance-driven fungicide brands, you're able to be more confident in that decision that you've made, because those brands are going to out-yield the untreated acre 9 times out of 10. They're going to out-yield the competitor brand 8 times out of 10. And I'm not usually a betting person, but those are pretty good odds. And so I do think it's important to highlight that, yes, weather's going to change year in and year out. Commodity prices are going to change year in and year out. But when you make a decision and you can be confident in that product is going to provide that consistent performance that you need year in and year out, that's what's going to put more bushels in the bin and more money back in your pocket.
Thank you, Max. And folks, if you want to learn about some of the crop protection options from BASF, consult your local BASF representative.
Greg Solier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Earlier in the program, Greg Solier outlined the active weather week that's predicted for next week. Greg, give us some more details. Who's going to see the moisture and when?
Yeah, active and moisture laden, and boy, everything but the kitchen sink comes down from severe weather potential from the eastern and southern Corn Belt on southward to about here in central Texas and points to the north and northeast. 1 to 2, some isolated areas of 3-inch totals. This on average is the rain snow line, and you do that old 10-to-1 ratio. There's a potential for probably at least a foot of snow in some particular areas of the northern plains and northwestern Corn Belt. It's drought relief. Look at it this way, but livestock managers heads up accordingly. And there's Arctic air poised to the north. The moisture later in the week works into the eastern states. A little something in the desert southwest, not much to speak of. And in the Pacific Northwest, that weather pattern is an active one as we move on through the early to middle portions of the week.
Take us into that first week in April. Greg, what do you see temperatures doing?
Well, from this standpoint here, this is not exactly what you want to see. Folks, I'm sure, have been spoiled rotten to the core wanting to get out there and get some field work going in weeks prior to current timing. And so here it is, the range of temperatures from the eastern states into late season Arctic air over the northwestern 2/3 of the country, the dip of the jet stream. You know the meteorology here, and here we go with more moisture Pacific Northwest, drought relief there if you want to look at it that way. more snow for Big Sky Country, the Central Plains into the northern and western Corn Belt. Severe weather from southern New England into the southeastern part of the country. Some opportunity for field work in this particular part of the country, and really they have that opportunity coming off a big drought relief weather pattern down there much of the wintertime season, i.e. the Tennessee Valley.
In the next week of April 8th, Greg, does that cold continue to push its way east?
The cold air is there. It's kind of easing its grip. It's progressive. It's finally, we think, beginning to move, but still up towards the Sioux. Look at the lobe of cold air, chilly soil, snow on the ground too, from Big Sky Country into the southeastern part of the country. Incidentally, we've got some fires as well breaking out over sections of the southern mid-Atlantic region, so the moisture there would be appreciated. The warmth over the western and southwestern sections of the country. Here it is, more snow into the Cascades, northern and central Rockies, late season snow for parts of the upper Midwest, western Corn Belt, severe weather from Kansas into the southeastern part of the country, at least maybe some normal precip into West Texas, but wind as well. The driest of the weather patterns across southeastern Canada and northern New England.
What do you see for that third week of April, Greg, temp-wise?
We think that, again, the colder air is easing, the trough beginning to finally lift on out. Nice ridge over the western part of the country, southeastern sections as well. But we still have this trough line from Oklahoma City into areas of the St. Lawrence River Valley. So we've got some late season snow for the Great Lakes region. Severe weather down south across the Tennessee Valley. Over the eastern third of the country, it's wet. Back to more normalized moisture over the western Corn Belt and a drier trend back west of the Missouri River Valley. Hang in there. It's mid to late April and beyond. We'll get out there in the fields.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is brought to you by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of highly effective and efficient high-speed discs and land rollers. Visit brandt.ca for more. Recently, the University of Illinois made an exciting announcement in the world of ag communications. Prairie Farmers editor Holly Spangler was on hand for the details, and she joins us this week. Holly, thanks for joining us, and fill us in. What was the big announcement from the U of I?
Yeah, it was pretty exciting this week. They have announced the formation of the James F. Evans Global Center for Food and Agricultural Communications, which is going to be kind of an exciting location, basically to bring in people to learn more about how to communicate about agriculture.
Now that is fascinating, an Ag Communications Center. Holly, from the University of Illinois' perspective, why would they want something like that on campus?
Well, like University of Illinois is a land-grant institution. There is a lot of agricultural research that happens there that can be communicated to the public and shared. They have a long history of an ag communications program founded by James F. Evans, who was one of my professors in college, who really kind of pioneered the whole idea of studying communications in agriculture.
And Holly, you mentioned there you are a proud alum. You've studied with and under Jim Evans. I mean, from a personal perspective, what does it mean for you to see this kind of improvement happening at your alma mater?
Yeah, I still remember sitting in Dr. Evans's office as a freshman because I had not gone to the U of I to be an ag communications major. I'd never even heard of it before, and realized that there was this whole career. And I remember sitting there in his office and him telling me all the different, possibilities and feeling like, okay, this is it. This is my people. And just a couple of months ago, a bunch of those, alums and people I went to school with and people who graduated since then all kind of came back together to brainstorm, what could this center do and what could it look like and what kind of things could they focus on. And it's just phenomenal to see that network of people come back together and kind of all around this person, Dr. Evans, who's always encouraged us to do our very best.
That is fantastic. Holly, one of the things I noticed in your story were the comments from the school about how they hope to encourage more students to get out and work at communicating agricultural topics. And I understand that's something Prairie Farmers ahead of the curve on. Could you fill us in?
Yeah, absolutely. I love working with students, and it's been a real delight, especially this last year, working with some students in ag communications on what we call the Prairie Farmer Project. And they write stories for us, and we kind of we work together and develop ideas, and they talk to researchers on campus and put some of that together. And our very first story from one of those students is running online this week at Prairie Farmer. Olivia Charles out of Mount Carroll, Illinois, wrote a great first person piece about why the industry is going to need more young beef producers. So it's exciting to see that all come to fruition. And that's the kind of thing that the center wants to foster, more of those kind of industry and university partnerships.
Absolutely. It's so crucial to bridge that gap between those of us who understand agriculture, maybe grew up with it, and those who didn't. So, Holly, you mentioned that article can be found on the prairiefarmer.com website. Folks, starting now, get on there and check it out. And Holly, we'll let you go. I know you've got a lot of preparation for the Prairie Farmer Master Farmer Awards coming next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Folks, stay with us. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we come back.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. Well, I said, show me your gauge on your old tractor. And this fella did. It looks like it's sitting on empty. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants producers are made to make it last. Well, once again, for a second time on my Max Armstrong Tractor Stuff Facebook page, I said, show me your gauge. I was thinking, well, your temperature gauge, your ammeter, maybe your oil pressure gauge on the old tractor. Oh no, Joe Gill showed me a fuel gauge on his 1941 Farmall M at Albany, Minnesota. Joe is the past president of the National Association of Farm Broadcasting, and he's there on KASM radio at Albany. And I'm not sure that gauge is sitting on E. I assume that it works, and he showed me the mechanism too for that tractor fuel gauge. But that brought a comment from Todd Binger in Illinois, who showed me how he gauges the fuel in his tractor tanks. He uses an old wooden stick, as you see right there by that case DC. It's marked for the various tractors that he has. Well, however you gauge it, make sure it's correct. You don't want to run out of fuel. Well, let's find out what's going to be selling in the week ahead. Each week, we look forward to introducing Mark Stock here from Big Iron Auctions. Mark?
Well, hello, Max. March Madness is underway. It's an exciting time, and it's been a very exciting March so far for Big Iron and Sullivan Auctioneers. Next week on March the 27th, Meyer Beef and Grain LLC, they are retiring from Hitchcock, Oklahoma. They'll be selling a 2017 John Deere 1890C no-till air seeder with cart and a John Deere 9510R four-wheel drive tractor. Mitchell Equipment, your Case IH dealer with locations in Nebraska, will be selling a 2022 Case IH Magnum 380 Road Track mechanical front tractor. 3 2022 Case IH Early Riser 2150 Series 24 row 30 planters. Outstanding equipment. Van Wall Equipment with various locations across Iowa will be selling some outstanding planters. 2022 year model John Deere 1775 NT Maximerge 5E 16 row 30 planter. Alliance Tractor with locations across Indiana and Illinois will sell John Deere 9460R four-wheel drive tractor and John Deere 333G compact track loaders. And Hague Implement with locations across Minnesota will be selling late model tillage equipment, planters, manure spreaders, lawn mowers on March the 27th. We want to thank all of the sellers, bidders, and buyers for using Big Iron and Sullivan Auctioneers.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. And we're always proud to meet that next generation of agricultural leader. This week, we're talking with Cassidy Jaggers. She's serving as the Colorado State FFA Treasurer for the year. And Cassidy, thanks for talking with us this week.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
Talk to me about what got you involved in FFA, Cassidy. Was it something that was always on your radar?
So I grew up with an ag teacher as a dad. So I have always been involved in FFA, whether I wanted to or not. I kind of just joined to begin with because my dad was my ag teacher, but I've grown very fond of the organization of FFA, and it's taken me to various places around the country, and I just couldn't imagine being the person that I am today without the organization of FFA.
That's fantastic. And you had the chance to get some leadership opportunities in high school. You graduated high school, left for college, then decided you wanted to be a state officer. Cassidy, what made you want to move into this role?
I have always strive for success in my life. I want to be an extremely successful individual, and I have done competitions through FFA and things like that, and I've been very lucky and grateful to be as successful in this organization as I have been. And I just wanted to give back to the members of Colorado FFA. I believe that you don't see very many people that do things for others anymore, and just being able to come back and serve the Colorado FFA members, whether that be going to chapter visits or putting on a state convention for them, whatever I can do to help them grow as people and to help them have a great time in FFA is something that I'm super passionate about.
That's what it's all about, Cassidy. We wish you the best completing your year of service. That's Cassidy Jaggers, the Colorado State FFA Treasurer. Farmers are looking everywhere for advantages in 2024. And for this week's tech segment, Chad Colby brings us an update on a government tax code section that allows some farmers to depreciate the mineral's value in their fertilizer. We'll let Chad come with more details.
So I love talking about technology, that's no secret. But on this week's tech segment, a little bit of different technology. I've got a farmer friend of mine from Iowa. Dave, let's talk a little bit about something I think most farmers don't know about. We know about depreciating Section 179. Talk about Section 180. It's interesting to me.
Yeah, Section 180 goes out. I've worked with the BOASAFR folks on my land, and they go out and they quantify the value of the minerals and nutrients in that top 6 3/4 inches. That they'll give you a capital asset value on that, which then you can take off your taxes. And in the U.S., the average value is about $1,500 to $2,000. So in reality, that puts about $500 of real cash value in your pocket.
You know, it's interesting. When you told me about this a few weeks ago, I went and did a little research. These guys have been doing this for several years across the country, and you did it on your family farm at home. What advice would you give to farmers? This to me looks like a must-do in my opinion.
The best thing for me is I didn't have to go out and buy a new machine to take advantage of this tax deduction. It was already, I owned it on my 240 acres there in central Iowa.
So talk about the process. It's pretty easy to do.
Pretty straightforward. I contacted them, filled out a form, gave them my legal descriptions. They deployed their soil sampling crew, and then it had a shelf-ready report for my CPA that was signed, sealed, and delivered, ready to go. And the beautiful thing about it is they have a CPA on staff that backs it up, but they also have Paul Neefer as an advisor, world-renowned CPA that's also backing this report up.
Well, it's interesting. I think it's like any other technology. You got to do your own research. So if you go to colbyagtech.com at the top, I put a Section 180 up there. Go do your homework. And Dave, I appreciate you coming over here and kind of sharing a little bit more about this. In the climate we're in agriculture, I think everybody's looking for that next advantage, and I think this is a pretty good one.
Like I said, with commodity prices headed to the direction they are, we're always looking for an opportunity within our tax code, within the tax opportunity.
Thank you, Chad. And folks, a reminder, we are not accountants here at This Week in Agribusiness, so consult your professional tax preparer before making any changes. Stick around. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we come back. When we take a look at some of this new equipment in the world of agriculture, it's a lot of steel, it's a lot of iron, it's a lot of paint. But it's also a lot of technology and a lot of electronic components that need to work perfectly. I caught up with Jim Steinke of Ag Express Electronics about how they are working to keep farmers in the fields.
The biggest challenge in the service department is how do you simulate the piece of electronics, the piece of equipment, right? How do you simulate a tractor? How do you simulate a combine? Well, honestly, the simulation is the key. We build a simulation tool and do it on a workbench, and we simulate what a tractor or a combine, what a sprayer, what a planter is actually doing, the operations of a baler. So that is the key to being successful in the service. And in this day and age with the economy the way it is, you know, looking to service first, it's sustainable. It saves them time, it saves the farmers money, and that's what our secret sauce is to that, I think.
Springtime is coming. Planting season 2024 is just about with us. Jim, on the tech side, is there any preparation farmers should be doing to get ready for their with all the new additions to their equipment?
Well, Mike, that's a good question. And I wish everybody would be proactive in this. Not everybody is, right? They might roll out of bed and say, I'm going to plant today. Well, so to be proactive in your look at your planter, and if you want to start at the back of the planter first, you want to start with your seed sensors. You start with the seed sensors, just unplug your seed sensor. There's sensor testers that are available where you just plug into it, wiggle a little tie wrap or stick down the seed tube, and it'll beep at you. At least you know then it works. Then you look at your harness, look at the connections, make sure there's not corrosion there. You can test continuity through your harness with a little voltmeter, like a continuity tester. You just jump between the green wire and the black wire, and you test between ground and that sensor line on that harness, and it should beep at you, and then you'll know that your harness has good continuity. You want to test your connector at the monitor so that the harness, as it's connecting to whatever monitoring system you have, make sure that the lock ring is good, that it's solid, it's solidified, that it tightens. Make sure there's not a lot of corrosion there either, because corrosion is the biggest problem in the wiring harnesses. And when you get into the cab of the tractor, obviously you get your monitoring system in there. It's a little harder to test the monitor, so my advice is to send it to your local Ag Express, and we'll test it for you and make sure that it's going to read the way that you want it to read. And then the last thing is ground speed. Whatever the ground speed sensor that you're hooked to, you need to test that. There's a radar simulation tool that we actually have that we manufacture that you can test the radar, and it sometimes is as simple as just waving in front of it to make sure it reads ground speed.
Always good to get those electronics checked before you need them in the field. You can learn more at agexpress.com. Thanks so much for joining us here. Be sure to catch us next time, same place, same time, right here for This Week in Agribusiness. Have a great one, everybody.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.